Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
So the Pirates went out and got another hitter. They added another person over in the first base area. I don't know if it's exactly what I wanted to do, Craig. I was talking about the idea of getting somebody that's going to be here for 3-4 years and solidify it and be a professional hitter that would boost the lineup. Instead, you basically went out and got two replacement level players in Choi and Carlos Santana, one of which is not going to hit against left-handed pitchers, most likely. Santana basically sits on the bench, and you got one playing DH and one playing first base, likely Choi at first and Santana at DH when there's a righty pitcher out there. So I'm not super excited about it. The positions were filled, and maybe the idea is payroll flexibility, especially with Carlos Santana, because you're waiting to see what kind of increase the front office gets as the team moves to the next step in this whole rebuild and then start trying to win phase, which I think, again, this year is all about making progress, a little bit more progress out there on the field.
It's a step above what it was last year. Last year, first base was Yoshi Tsutsugo, who agreed to learn the position, and we paid $4 million. And then you brought in Daniel Vogelback, which was for around $800,000, and then a total of $1 million with a buyout. So, $5 million on the position. Throwing Michael Chavis in over there. At the first base position, it was like -3 WAR. If you want to use maybe about 1 WAR for Vogelback's time at DH, since he didn't play any first base, they paid $5 million or a little bit more than that for -2 WAR. This time, it kind of seems like they're hoping that they can, have Santana out there, definitely against left-handed pitchers. Last year, looking up his splits, especially once he went to Seattle, he was hitting like 265 against left-handed pitchers. For his career, he's right around that mark, maybe a little bit higher. Like I think it was like maybe 276. So he definitely hits, the left-handed pitchers better. I mean, at times they're wondering if, the shift, I saw Fangraphs did an article about whether or not he could be a potential beneficiary because he was shifted. I think it was like 98% last year, more than any human being on the face of the earth was shifted. It was number one in Major League Baseball. So there's definitely a possibility for that. People haven't given like it's definitely going to help him. Because I looked into some numbers. He changed his launch angle last year. He did have more exit velocity. So was he flying out more? He did have 16 home runs from the left-hand side versus 3 home runs from the right-hand side, but he didn't hit as much, right-handed. So Chris, I feel like that we are saying, okay, here's $11 million. And that we hope that we can put these two guys out there together in a combination with maybe, Miguel Andujar doing a little bit of DHing, Santana doing a little bit of DHing, Choi doing a little bit of DHing, Santana and Choi having somewhat of a platoon at first base and working that into, 2 WAR, 1.5 to 2 WAR somehow. And then at that point in time, you're basically paying what the market value was for WAR last year, around, $5.5 million for 1 win above replacement. So is it better than it was last year? Yes. Is it the answer? No. Is it an answer? Like you said, maybe just because it maybe just stretches the pocketbook a little bit more. So there will be more money dedicated, hoping that payroll goes up every year. I don't know, Chris. I shouldn't say that I'm like meh about the move, but I mean, I'm a little bit above meh.
This episode of Bucs in the Basement and every episode of Bucs in the Basement brought to you by Yins. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. That's Yins with 2 Z's on there. You can go to shopyins.com. You can also find the link inside of the show notes. You can find it at bucsinthebasement.com. It's very easy. Go in there and get yourself the one brand for all of Pittsburgh sports. It's basically all that Craig wears. You're a walking billboard, for crying out loud. I'm convinced that you make more money on this than I do, just because of the fact that like you are decked out in just Y's. That's what you got. Free shipping on orders that are $75 or more, and there's 20% off for new customers. So a pretty good deal right now as the holidays approach. Shopyins.com. So I have no problem with the move, except it doesn't get my motor going. Like I really want to get excited about prospects for the team, and it would have been cool like to just see like a signing happen. You know, I know that isn't their plan. It makes more sense for payroll flexibility to do this. It's at least professional hitters, and it's not a catcher that's been dropped by 2 different teams that you're trying to convert into a first baseman by the name of Zach Collins, right? That you're going to put at first base. Like we're not doing crazy experiments at this point. We're not taking undersized players that probably should be second baseman and sticking them at first when they get hot and wondering whether or not that's going to be your first baseman for the next 5 years. What you've said is we need something at first base that's more permanent. We can't be taking swings anymore. I guess that's what I'm looking at, Craig. Like the crazy, here's a cast off, maybe we can still find something with him. That's not what this is. So it's at least a step in the right direction. Like you're going to have to be a professional baseball player to play on the field in a Pirates uniform this year and not be somebody like, Josh Van Meter. Like you're not going to be that and get on the field. I think those guys are gone. Does it signify that to you? Because I feel like that's where we're at now, that you're going to have a starting lineup that's either going to be somebody that they actually believe is going to be long-term and has shown some results and has done well in the minor leagues, and you've actually seen some production, and the hangers on, and maybe this guy can unlock it, and most teams would have given up on that guy already, but the Pirates are still sticking with him. Those guys are probably gone now when you see Choi and Santana come in to fill the role over at first and DH.
Yeah, because it made me feel better with each move they made. With Choi coming in, I was happy, but then I was also thinking this means they're probably still going to try out Andujar over at first base to be his platoon. And then they go out and get, Lewin Diaz off of waivers. And I was thinking, okay, well, once Choi is traded or if, Choi gets hurt, then it's going to be Andujar and Diaz. Diaz hasn't hit a lick in the major leagues, but has like 16 defensive runs saved, 9 outs above average in his limited time, at first base over the past 3 years. But now with Santana coming in, I mean, probably Santana and Choi are gone by the end of the year. Diaz doesn't have any options. I don't know if he, sticks around as just a strict defensive replacement for one position on the 40-man, or actually it would be like on the active roster. I don't know if that ends up happening. But like you said, Chris, it definitely takes away from the fact of I don't think we're going to see Josh Van Meter standing over there anymore, which makes me really, really happy. Now the focus has to go towards pitching. And if you want to go get another outfielder, I wouldn't be upset.
Well, that's the only place where there might be a hole. Like, think about this. I'm looking at their lineup right now when you add Choi and Santana in. And go around the horn real quick. If your catcher is Endy Rodriguez and a vet, that is going to be exactly what I just described. A veteran that's going to help out while a prospect shows up and gets his shot. Okay? So I'm fine with that. That's what you want. That's not a retread. That's not somebody who you're picking up off the garbage heap. First base and DH are professional Major League Baseball players. They may be replacement level, but if used in the proper way, they also bring a little bit of like, that vet status. That those are professional baseball players, all right? I mean, O'Neal Cruz is a big-time prospect, professional baseball player. Brian Hayes is somebody that's in your long-term plans, professional baseball player. Brian Reynolds is a professional baseball player. Every team in baseball is wishing the Pirates would trade him. He's in every rumor on Twitter, in every fan base's Twitter, right? He's in Astros Twitter, he's in White Sox Twitter, he's in Yankees Twitter, the Boston Red Sox Twitter, the Angels Twitter, the Dodgers Twitter. Everybody's like, you think we could get Brian Reynolds? Professional baseball player, right? I mean, Rodolfo Castro could be the answer at second base. Plus, you have other guys that are going to be challenging. You have plenty of professional baseball players. You're not throwing somebody out there that has never been anything that you're trying to unlock. That's a good thing, except when I look in the outfield. I mean, Zawinski, although you're excited about him, we don't know what he's going to be, and we don't know if he could be consistent. We don't know exactly what Kel Mitchell is. We're not exactly sure which outfielders are going to sort out here on this roster. So yeah, an outfielder wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I don't think they're going to do that, though. I think they're going to let their outfielders play and try to find the professional baseball players that came through their system that are going to stand in the outfield. So you're right. I think you move to pitching now. I think you look at that pitching staff. That's the other thing that I said you need to do this offseason is go get a pitcher. And this could be a pitcher that you sign to a 4-year deal that's a real veteran that you're not looking to flip. If you're going to go the route you went with Choi and Santana, go do that. Be bold. If you can make a deal with somebody who you could say, this person's going to be in my rotation, and I feel like they will still be a viable, good pitcher through the entirety of that contract or the most part of it, I would go make that move right now because this is very, very hard to get pitching. Teams have a hard time in free agency. There's a lot of competition for it, and it's even harder to trade for good starting pitching. So if you're able to pull it off at this point, I would do it. It'll be interesting to see if that's what their focus is, or if they're doing the Jose Quintana, let's just see if we can get a guy who can rebound and then, flip that guy midway through the year.
Yeah, and I know that Rob Biertempfel of The Athletic quoted Ben Cherington saying that Cherington wouldn't rule out looking to add offense in the outfield, but it didn't seem like as much of a solution as he posed for first base and DH when he was saying we have to solve or fix that position. Just basically saying if something comes up, we wouldn't rule that out, but then did point and has pointed towards, a couple times wanting to get 1 to 2 starting pitchers and having one of those starting pitchers be somebody that they sign for more than 1 year. The biggest name that has come up recently, I mean, Jose Quintana, there's been, he said he would come back. They said they would love to have him back. I'm seeing, estimated some places $12 to $14 million a year. Not sure if that prices him outside of the Pirates. Most years it probably would. But then they're going after supposedly interest on both sides for a Kyle Gibson from Philadelphia, a guy who had a over 5 ERA last year. A lot of people would say, okay, fits right in with the Pirates. The thing we look at, Chris, is whip. Last year he was, below a 1.4. I think it was like a 1.366 whip. So, I mean, is a professional pitcher. But if that is your only answer, well, number one, he's not left-handed. And so we still wouldn't have a left-handed starter and still don't have a left-hander in the pitching staff at all right now with Manny Banuelos gone and supposedly signing over in Korea or Japan or someplace. So that's where it would kind of fit in, that maybe they would sign a Kyle Gibson for like a 1 year. And then hopefully, I mean, there's been some smoke around, a player like a Sean Manaea.
That's a great name. That would be a guy, that would be a big steal. He's going to cost money. I've been looking at him and I've been looking at Noah Syndergaard. Okay. I mean, Manaea's 31. He was worth 4.5 wins last year, and he's a good pitcher, keeps guys off base generally. He's got a low whip. Noah Syndergaard He split between two teams last year. He's only worth 2 wins above replacement at age 30. He may be riding under the radar, but he keeps guys off base, and he's at that perfect distance from his surgery where this is when the guy is completely healthy. Like, I mean, look at a team that's done this the last couple of years, okay? And I go to them every once in a while, okay? And because they actually make moves in some ways very similarly to when the Pirates go and find something that's a value move. Look at what the White Sox did with Johnny Cueto last year. And they identified that due to some injuries and not really getting himself 100%, you sign him to a minor league deal, and look what he turned into, right? Now, he's a little too old for this exercise, but look what they just did with Mike Clevenger, a guy that had an injury, came back, showed that he was keeping guys off base, but his ERA was a little high, right? They're betting on the fact now at the age of 32, in that second year removed from the Tommy John, boom, he's off and running, and he's back to what he used to be. Syndergaard would be an interesting name, and Manaea's if the Pirates sign him, pump your fist, pop champagne, and tell yourself this team is moving to the next step here, because that's a real pitcher. He walks in, I think, day one, and he is your best pitcher on your staff.
Oh yeah, and that's the big thing right now is in that same article that I was reading, it was talking about Cherington, wanting to go and add to the young core of pitchers, and he put, our old friend Mitch Keller and JT Brubaker, he put them in that list of young players, and that would be along with Roansy Contreras. Now, at that point in time, you have, right now, like a Johan Oviedo, and then in the 5 spot, you have Luis Ortiz, Zach Thompson, and Bryce Wilson fighting it out. Luis Ortiz, as much as I want to see him in the majors, and as much of a show he put on in some of his starts in the majors last year, I'm thinking he's going to start in AAA. Johan Oviedo, the guy that we acquired, Jose Quintana deal along with Malcolm Nunez, they had to put him down in the minors, build him back up to be a starter. So he's, may not get a ton of innings. That's where like a Kyle Gibson comes in. The guy consistently produces and is like almost like an innings eater, and he would be more towards the 5 along the end with, he's like an older JT Brubaker.
Well, but he's old.
Really be.
See that, but that's the thing. I want a guy who's not going to break down on me, right? Like if I'm looking for the idea, and the Pirates might not be looking this way, but I'd like to see him sign somebody to a 3-4 year contract. Okay, and make that person a permanent part for the next couple of years in your rotation, because you have so many question marks, and if you're ready to start moving forward, that's what you'd want to do. Gibson at 34 years old, that's not a guy you signed to that long-term deal. He may be good in 3 years, but there's a lot that would point that he wouldn't be. Like, I'd rather them take a swing at Michael Wacha, I mean, he was worth 3 wins last year. He had a whip of 1.11. He's not one of the big names that are out there, but he's a 30-year-old pitcher. And if he just gives you the production you've seen so far, that would be a guy you could sign and say, this guy's part of my rotation, and I know he's taking the ball every 5 days, and he's going to give me a chance to win baseball games. You need more guys like that in your rotation. Yeah,
a guy that I look at all the time, and I'm pretty sure I've been looking at him since 2018, 2019, and at times it was when we used to have those conversations, Chris, and these will sound like these were conversations like when we were talking about how we would trade, a prospect along with a player to acquire a starting pitcher, and I always brought up Matthew Boyd. And Matthew Boyd is somebody who was only able to pitch about 13 innings last year for Seattle, hometown team, pitched fairly well. But for the most part, I mean, looking back at his numbers in 2020 was like the only time it was like a 1.475 whip. 2021 with Detroit, a 1.271. It was a 1.157 back in 2018, a 1.230 in 2019. 2020, the number we normally throw out, 1.475. But it could be a guy that would maybe semi fit into that mold of, taking a lower deal to prove it, but somebody that I wouldn't mind giving him the 2-year deal And if it's not working out, I'm still thinking there'd be somebody that you could trade him to. Just because you sign him to a 2-year deal doesn't mean you have to keep him for a 2-year deal. But it's kind of fits into that mold of that younger or youngish, he's like 32 player that is kind of looking to resurrect a career that was going fairly well with Detroit at one point.
You know, an interesting name. The most outside the box name when I look on the list of everybody that you could pick up. Remember Carlos Martinez?
Oh yeah,
he was with the Cardinals, right? And he got suspended 80 games for testing positive for a performance enhancing substance. You could be very angry about that. Look, I don't like guys that cheat either, right? But he's also a guy that had an awful lot of skill, was coming off an injury, and sometimes these guys use those things just to heal. He's not right to use it to heal, but sometimes they use those things to heal, okay? And so if he is the pitcher that should have gotten a $17 million extension, but then because of the suspension, basically, like, yeah, we don't want to touch him. That's what the Cardinals were like, right? Because they move on from guys. They've always been that as an organization. Man, you could probably get him on the cheap. Like, I'd at least have a conversation. Like, Carlos, what was the story behind that? Can we live with that? Can we get him on the cheap and hold on to him for a couple of years? And then all of a sudden he blossoms and like reinvents himself. I'm probably wrong with that. And I'm sure there's people that are angry that I even suggested it. But I mean, like, I see that name and I just remember what he was when he was 25 years old, you know? And now he's what, 29 or 30? He would fall right in that range of pitchers that you could pick up. And if he was good, he'd be good for 4 years. I mean, look, Manaea, that's what you want, right? Syndergaard, I'm all for it. Some of the names you threw out, awesome. Okay, but when I'm making my list of all possibilities, he might be the guy that you grab like on the sly and give him a minor league contract where you have control over him with an option if all of a sudden he performs where it kicks in and you have control of him for a couple of years. If you can get creative and you can convince him.
Yeah, and it kind of brings me back to the conversation about outfield a little bit, because as I was flipping through, I was flipping back and forth, and the starting pitcher conversation, it shows that there's always guys that you can find. Like, they found Tyler Anderson.
Look what he became, too. See, that's the thing about Tyler Anderson that aggravates me. Look what he became. Yeah. Like, right now, if you could get your hands on Tyler Anderson, you'd be happy right now, wouldn't you? You'd be like, well, look at this guy.
Ecstatic.
The Dodgers love him, right? I mean, he's a good pitcher. And so that actually kind of aggravates me, because in the end, he could have been that piece. And you could have still gone through your build and been like, and we also have this guy sitting in our rotation, right? There's nothing that says that you can't have a guy like that around. So that's why I'm saying, like, at this point, I wouldn't be looking to move on from somebody. You want to actually find somebody who you can get control of at an affordable cost that has certain attributes. Like, I mean, if you want to simplify it, find guys that keep guys off base, you know? I mean, everybody has their metrics that they love. Fielding, independent pitching. I love whip. You know, I love that. I love players that keep guys off base. You know, it's something I learned playing fantasy baseball years ago. All right, is that I identify players that nobody's paying any attention to, who had an off year, who may have given up a couple extra runs, and think to myself, well, is it them or is it the team that surrounded them? Was it bad luck? Are they all of a sudden a bad pitcher? And if I see that the guy doesn't put a lot of guys on base and he's got a low whip, I go, there's a guy who's got an excellent opportunity to be a good pitcher again or become a good pitcher. He's like on the cusp of it. And I take those swings. And I don't think it's wrong for an organization. Whatever their metric is, they should have something that they really believe in, that they sit there and say, oh, this is a person that's being undervalued that we could get under contract and hold on to for a couple of years. That's the next move I want to see the Pirates make. I don't want the one-year journeyman or the flip project. I want them to identify somebody that their pro scouting is confident in, give that player a deal. If you want to put in option years or things that kick in because you don't want to get tied down in a deal like that, find that player and put that player into your rotation. Get some stability. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to go get a Manaea and then find that other guy. You know, that low-key signing that hasn't had a ton of success, but could be on the cusp because of the metrics. Like, pro scouting is going to mean so much for the Pirates organization. You don't know yet whether or not they're capable of doing this, but within the constraints of how Bob Nutting runs his team and the budget that he sets, it's up to Ben Cherington and the front office to operate within those constraints and create a winning baseball team. It may not be the same as it's not the same job as the general manager of the Mets, right? It's not the same job as the general manager of the Dodgers, but that's the constricts that they're within. So if they're doing that, and if it's going to work, it has to rely on pro scouting. Not only amateur scouting, but pro scouting, identifying guys in the major leagues that you can acquire within your budget that have something more than what the rest of baseball sees. And it's easier said than done, but that's what successful franchises do. And I don't know if we can take anything from the garbage dumpster diving that they've been doing, because those were all just like shots in the dark when they were going after those players over the last couple of years. But, I mean, at some point, they got to get a win. And I think the Tyler Anderson acquisition, think about it, that was a win. Somebody identified there was something in that guy to be able to flip him, and then look what he turned into. So there is a chance that they'll be able to pull that off and actually keep a player like that in their rotation.
Yeah, and that's like the next big step, is because, looking back on it now, would it have been nice to sign Tyler Anderson to, a 2 or 3 year deal? Absolutely. But you didn't know exactly what he was going to be. And even while he was with us, he was above average, but he still wasn't exactly what he became with the Dodgers. He was maybe on his way, but like you said, they did identify that. Jose Quintana, I think, Chris, we may have been like the only people out there that were saying he's the best pitcher on your staff, and other people are saying he's more like Trevor Cahill.
No, we were on Quintana. We were on Quintana before the signing. Yeah. We actually, you hear us listing these players. That's how I identified Quintana last year.
Yeah.
Absolutely no lie. Looking at his stats, looking at his whip, looking at the trends, looking at how he keeps guys off base, looking at things that he wasn't a great pitcher. He flew under the radar, right? But, me just playing fantasy baseball, we were floating Jose Quintana as a name before they even signed him. You can see that. All the episodes are on demand on bucksinthebasement.com and on every podcast player. You can go back and find that offseason and hear us talk about him. And when we were identifying him, just like we're identifying some of these guys right now. So look, they identified him. They were on the same wavelength. Like every once in a while, I get excited about how this front office operates, because we will sit there and do that, and then they'll do it. And it worked out with Quintana, didn't it?
It did.
They have actually been able to pro scout starting pitching, haven't they? At this point, between Anderson and Quintana, you can actually say they're good at scouting pro pitchers at the major league level and identifying a guy who may not be the flashy signing at the top of the free agent list that they can afford, that they think still has something there. And they can see it in the stats, and they can see it in their scouting. That's a good thing. So if they can continue doing that, I got to believe that they can also find that guy they can sign to the 3-4 year deal that's going to be productive in that rotation, take the ball every 5 days, and you don't have to worry about at least one of your 5 slots. Because Quinn Priester could come up and be a star. Mitch Keller could take the steps that we were waiting for him to take a year or two ago. Contreras could continue to develop and be great, but you are not going to get 5 guys that come through your system and be legit 5 starters on your team. You're going to have to go outside the organization at some point. So answer one of those questions. That's what this offseason is, right? There's 50 questions, answer 3. Cut down on the amount of questions, start doing that, and so you can start building to actually winning, because you don't answer all 50 questions in the first offseason you decide to compete. So you got to answer some of them right now.
And at least hold down some positions solidly, like first base.
Right. Give people a jersey they can buy and keep for a few years. Right? That's okay to do. So, those are the things. Because right now, if you're buying a jersey, right, what are you doing? You're walking around in Yins wear. Okay,
I'm walking around in Yins wear, man.
That's all you walk around in, right? You're like, you know what? I don't need to buy Steelers stuff and Penguins stuff and Pirates stuff. I could just wear Y's to every game, and then I can spend less money. Okay, really, that's kind of how you see things. But give people something other than a prospect, somebody who they actually can believe in, that they could buy a jersey for. Get excited, right?
I'd like to see that too, and I'm the guy that walks around in the Last Things Millage jersey because it's kind of like half a joke.
It is a joke. It's a good joke.
And I'm like the only one that's laughing.
Yeah, well, sometimes the best jokes are those.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day